everyone, and welcome to Buzzer Beaters. I'm Eddie Aparicio, and this is Anthony Tuan Corral. Buzzer Beaters is a podcast that's dedicated to basketball with an emphasis on the NBA. It's also a property of grumblingsmedia.com. You can find us, Buzzer Beaters, at grumblingsmedia.com, Rumble, YouTube, under the profile Grumblings Media, as well as your traditional podcast outlets such as Spotify, Google, Apple, and Pandora. You can also find us on Facebook and X, formerly known as Twitter. If this is your first time, the format of our show is that Anthony and I will pick two topics, usually, and play host to each other's topics with the intent of spending about 15 minutes to 20 minutes per topic. Sometimes we might go a little bit over, sometimes we might go a little under. As you've probably seen the last few weeks, though, we've actually been intending to do 4 topics, and we actually only get down to 3. So this week, we're actually going to scale it down to 3, because we're going to see if we can still get within that hour limit. That's our goal, is to try and get within this hour limit, because, we don't want to go too over, because then we start losing the attention of you guys. So, but anyway, for those of you who have been listening, this is our episode number 8. In our previous episodes 7 and 6, we love the comments. You guys have been giving us great commentary, and we invite that. We love it. Actually, we're probably going to go ahead and dedicate a segment in future shows to talk about some of your comments. So please go ahead and do so. But anyway, without further ado, let me go ahead and tell you the topics that we're going to talk about. So what I'm planning to talk about are the NBA playoffs. Of course, we're here. We had the semifinals last week. They just finished, and now we're in the conference finals. And as we're having this podcast, the Mavs as well as the Wolves are actually playing right now, and it's a really close game. So we're going to talk about what led up to the conference finals, and then we'll keep going through these podcasts about the NBA finals until the finals is over. So the second topic is going to be posted by Tuan. So Tuan, I know that this is something we were intending to talk about last week. So go ahead and tell the audience what you plan to talk about in the second segment.
We were hoping to feed some of our previous conversations into it, but basically it's about large markets, and smaller markets. And do the larger markets have an inherent advantage to winning championships? Obviously, the NBA at its heart is a business, and businesses are always more successful when the larger markets have more visibility, more attention. So I wanted to talk a little bit on how that plays, not only on potentially refereeing, but also where players go, and I also wanted to take a little deep dive with you, Eddie, on what exactly is a large market. I know, a large market is viewership, but I think there's other definitions that are taken into account within large market, and there's reasons that viewership may go up and may go down. So wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Let's do it. Yeah, we'll talk about that. And then the final segment, we're only going to go through 3 this week to try and get it within an hour, is in the spirit of what we did last week in episode 7, where we actually talked about our all-time starting 5 and who we think should be in that all-time starting 5. We are also going to talk about the most overrated players of all time. Last week, we also talked about the most underrated players of all time. So we're going to talk about the most overrated, the top 5 most overrated from our opinion. I have 5. Tuan probably has 5, and he might have more. We have not balanced each other's.
But I'm only going to go touch 5.
I'm only gonna, it's funny. I had the same thing, as I was kind of like, I had some guys in mind, and then I'm like, let me go ahead and kind of see what other people are talking about. So I kind of like just tapered it down based on that, right? But I already had some names. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started about our topic. So as we always talk about first is our, the NBA playoffs. The NBA playoffs are going on right now, and what a playoff it has been. And Tuan, I got to tell you, man, as a Warrior fan, when my Warriors are not playing, man, it's more fun to watch, man. I'm not stressing out, man. I'm like enjoying watching the games, and the games have been really good in general, except there have been a few blowouts here and there, right? Definitely you saw that more in the Cavs and in Celtics series. And the other thing is, we actually, Tuan and I actually had picked brackets before the whole playoffs started. And, up to last week, I actually was up 12-10. And then lo and behold, the semi-conference, the semifinals just screwed me, and now Tuan essentially took me, he took the lead, and actually I can't come back. So Tuan, you win, man. We didn't talk about the wager, but man, we go out to lunch often, so I'll just go ahead and take you out to lunch to whatever place you want to go. It could be expensive. we can let, we don't have to go to McDonald's next time. We can go to a nice restaurant, bro. All right.
Uh,
So,
nice.
all right.
In and
So,
out.
yeah, that's an upgrade. So, but anyway, so let's go ahead and talk about the matchups in the East. So let's go ahead and talk about first, what led up to the conference finals that we're at right now. So Boston, when we were having our podcast last week, Boston actually was just taking out the Cavs. So they beat them 4-1. And, we knew the Cavs were going to be in a heap of trouble once Donovan Mitchell, wasn't really 100%. And of course, Jared Allen never came back. And, what you can see in these playoffs, and there's a theme here. Defense definitely, comes big in playoffs, right? The game kind of slows down unless you're the Pacers, of course. But usually the games slow down a little bit, and the deeper teams typically outlast the ones that are not. And Boston is definitely a very deep team. And, the Cavs, unfortunately they were down Jared Allen. And then, of course, you had, Donovan Mitchell, who was ailing. Those are two of their better players. And you could see that their lack of depth just couldn't keep up, man. And even then, even if they had those two guys, I think it still would have probably been the same result. I think Boston would still have beat them, but it probably would have been a gentleman's sweep like we saw. It was 4-1 is what we saw in the series, and it's predominantly because of the injuries that they have. But I got to give it to Cleveland. They showed up, man. They played hard. And Boston, I think, took them a little lightly initially. That's why they lost in game 2, in Boston. Boston has been showing signs that they kind of lose interest a little bit or just don't come in strong, right? I mean, we'll talk about, the Pacer game later, but what did you see? Again, what's your big takeaway from that Boston-Cleveland series that I have not mentioned, if anything?
Like you mentioned, Boston continues to be a little aloof.
Yeah.
And that game that Cleveland won. A couple things that I noticed. Number one, and this is a trend I think on multiple fronts, is like we're getting a lot more blowouts than I recall in previous series at this stage of the playoffs in prior years.
Right.
And so I'm not sure what to make of it. I don't know if it's injuries, it's
it's
lackadaisical,
depth, man. I think it's depth.
Yeah,
it's depth.
But like for example, one thing I've been reading is now the backcourt. Like Garland wants out if they're gonna re-up
Mitchell.
They're gonna re-up Mitchell, yeah, and then Mitchell's like he may want out if they re-up Garland. So like there's a little bit of tension here. Yeah, it's kind of
that's weird.
Yeah, it's kind of like we'll see what comes of it, but. Jared Allen not playing obviously hurt him. I think this would have been a different series had he played. One of the things I liked about Cleveland was their height, their size, which is similar to what Minnesota has. They got really big bigs. And so, but, even like you said, even with everyone on board, I don't think Cleveland was going to beat Boston.
No.
Boston's way too deep. And
if I would say one other takeaway, Twan, just to interject as you were talking, is that, the one thing that the main silver lining, I think, that happened with Cleveland is, with their limited bench, this gave the opportunity for someone like an Evan Mobley to emerge, right? Yeah. And Evan Mobley, definitely played very well in this series. And, he's the other, 7-footer that, when Jared Allen is playing, they are a matchup problem, just like Minnesota is. And they're both very defensive-minded players. So Evan Mobley got his first playoff experience and actually showed up well, man. So there's an encouraging sign for the future with Evan Mobley's emergence in this playoff run. So that was one thing I'll go ahead and add to the takeaway from that.
Yeah, series. Agreed on that. Agreed.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So moving on to the next series. So we had the Pacers. They outlasted the Knicks, and this is essentially what sealed my deal here with our matchup, man. I gotta tell you, I'm impressed, man. If we had, if this was like a bracket pool, I mean, you got the Final Four intact. You hit them all, man. That's impressive, man. And to be able, that's impressive, man. I only got one of the Final Four, and that's Boston. Everybody else got ousted, but I'm impressed, man. But anyway, the Pacers beat the Knicks in a 7-game series, and it was a great series, man. Run TMP, right? Tyrese, Miles, and Pascal, run TMP. Man, they came to play, and that team is fast, man. Let's just face it. They outlasted the Knicks. The Knicks, they were beat up too, man. They had, Josh Hart got hurt in that series, and Jalen Brunson broke his hand. He just got surgery. They didn't have Bojan Bogdanovic. He actually was out. You had Mitchell Robinson who was out, and then we also knew Julius Randle was not even there from the outset. So they were missing a lot of guys.
And a mistake I think they did. Anunoby was hurt, and
Anunoby too.
He came into the game, and I think he in an indirect way helped Indiana kind of get going, because he wasn't. You can tell he wasn't 100%. You can tell, and I'm wondering, Monday morning quarterbacking here, if it might have been better not to play him at all.
I think that they were trying to tap into their history there. The Willis Reed moment, right? Anunoby, who isn't 100%. Maybe he can rally the troops and get, be kind of like this example of someone who's just playing for the team. And Anunoby went out there and made a couple threes, but he wasn't moving the right. His gait was off, and you can say he just wasn't the same, man. So maybe they tried to tap into what worked in the past for him and to rally the troops. But unfortunately, like you said, it might have just. You just might have just got, them, I don't know what happened there, man, but the Pacers seemed to just, they were shooting lights out for one. If the Pacers shoot like that, they're going to beat, they're going to beat anybody if they shoot like that all the time, which, it doesn't happen on a regular basis. But, man, they're a fast-moving team, and they can shoot, and they outlasted the Knicks, man. So,
and Tom Thibodeau's a damn good coach.
Yeah.
One thing, we talked about earlier, kind of on when we went out, he runs his teams ragged.
He does.
Always, because he demands so much from them defensively, and they're always worn down.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, how much of it is the amount of time he played. Josh Hart didn't sit for the first 6 games that he played in the playoffs. At all.
Yeah.
And it doesn't surprise me that at some point these guys get hurt. They're just exhausted.
For sure.
They're just trying to catch their breath and push forward, and they get injured. So something to keep an eye on. But again, I don't want to overly critique Thibodeau and say he could have done anything different. I think he got the most out of that Knicks team.
He did.
But again, the way he does it is very taxing.
I agree. You can hear him barking. Orders the whole game, right? You hear that freaking horse. It's like, man, what is that noise, man? It sounds like a freaking dying dog, but it's him. But the future is bright for the Knicks, man. I got to tell you, they impress me. Like I said in the previous episode, I was pulling for that team, man, because I just like their grit. They just play hard, man, and that's what you want in the playoffs. And you want your players to play hard. That's the least you can do, right? As a pro athlete, is play hard with heart. And that team has a lot of heart, man. So the future's bright if they get everybody back, and I'm sure there's going to be some moves in the off season to try and get them better. But I think that they're pretty good right now. I think that they don't have to make many moves because they just getting back all their players that were injured. Julius Randle, one of them. I think that's going to help him out tremendously for next season. So we'll see what happens, man.
Yeah, just to be kind of messed up, when you were doing your Thibodeau barking, Thibodeau, and I'm sure this has been said, but Thibodeau reminds me of the Penguin when Danny DeVito played the Penguin in Batman. When he's so he reminds me of that. I don't want to be messed up, but I just look at him like, dude, is that Danny DeVito?
He's loud too. You can hear him, man. It's like on the TVs, it's like, holy crap, what is that? It's him.
He is loud, which is a testament to him, because in this day and age, there's not many coaches like that anymore.
No, I agree. And what impresses me is that guy does that every freaking game. And after the post-game show, he actually still has a voice, unlike Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers like, hey, these guys are playing hard. It's like he has no voice, And then Tom Thibodeau's barking the whole time, and his voice is still intact, man. It's impressive, man. But anyway, so
the Knicks had a good season. We'll see what I think Randall a free agent? I think we talked about that in previous shows. I don't remember if he is or not.
No, he's not. I think they can trade for him though, but he's not a free agent.
I think a couple of moves here and there. I know they're sorry, I forget his name. The Stein guy, the center.
Isaiah Hartenstein.
Hartenstein. He's a keeper. I think he's
absolutely. He'd be a guy I think would be great for the Warriors. He's one of the guys that we targeted.
He is, but I think he's probably a restricted free agent, and so they're probably they're probably gonna. I mean,
match him. Yeah,
they should keep him. He's definitely someone they should keep.
I agree. So now this leads us up to what happened in Game 1 yesterday of the conference finals between the Pacers
Pacers had
and
it, bro.
the
Pacers had it.
Pacers and Celtics. Man, I gotta tell you, man, that team plays freaking. I mean, they're like fast. They are. I mean, and even after the game, I don't know if you saw the post game interview with Jaylen Brown. I mean, you can tell he was pretty distraught, about the performance, and he was pretty much saying, man, we're not happy, man. We almost lost at home, and we just weren't ready, and these guys are running a track meet, and we have to keep up. We have to figure it out, right? We have to adjust. So, but the thing is, they hadn't played in 6 days. They were pretty much rusty. You could see it. And again, we've talked about the Celtics. They're kind of laissez-faire. Sometimes they kind of go through the motions, right? They know that they're good. They know that they're deep, and they think that hey, we can just show up and execute, and we'll win. And when a team comes over like the Pacers, shooting lights out. I mean, they were shooting lights out, and
They should have won the game.
They should have won that game. I know, and all I had to do was that one. All they had to do was get the ball inbounded, and they would have gotten fouled, and game over, man. And they couldn't even get the ball inbounded, man. I mean, but that's the Celtics' strength. The Celtics, they are a very defensive-minded team, and we're actually as the audience, watching, these two teams. These two teams are actually the fastest-paced teams in the NBA and the most efficient offensive teams in the NBA. And you can see their score. I mean, they're like 130 points, right? Already, right? It already reached. So, and of course they went to overtime. But this series looks like it could go 7, man. I mean,
I will tell you, I think in terms of expectations, if this series goes 7, which I think it can,
yeah,
I think most people thought that Boston should sweep or win 4-1, 4-2 max. I think that people think Boston is that much better than Indiana. Indiana has been my dark horse team.
Yep.
I think that I'm curious, and obviously, if it goes 7, I think that might help Boston in the long run, because when they get to the finals, they're gonna come across an opponent they haven't to a level they haven't experienced yet. That it is progressively getting harder. Like,
for sure.
If I look at Minnesota, I could argue that Minnesota's even if Minnesota were to move on and win the whole thing, I could, depending on how it goes with Boston, but I could argue that the Denver series was the hardest series they will play in the whole playoffs.
You think so? You think it'll be harder if Boston gets by the Pacers?
Well, what I'm saying is it could be, right? We need to see, right?
I don't know, man. We'll get into the West, but I have my thoughts on that, on the Denver Nuggets, which I had already kind of talked about in the previous episode, but we'll get there. But the Wolves, I mean, they're, again, a theme that I've seen in the playoffs: depth, and defense, right? I mean, we all know defense wins championships, right? Yep. But depth is definitely key. And I think, honestly, that was the downfall of the Denver Nuggets. We'll get into that, once we get into the West. But I see the Pacers in Boston. I think that's potentially going to go 7. Now, the only thing here is that, Boston was rusty. They had taken 6 days off, and now they kind of got punched in the mouth, almost lost at home. They typically play pretty well after that, man. So it's going to be interesting. If the game is still close in Game 2, which is happening tomorrow, if the game is close, this is going 7, man. If Boston blows them out, then we'll see what happens in Game 3 if they actually show up and say with that same fire and hunger that we're going to see if they win, tomorrow, right? But we shall see. But as far as let's, since you already won the matchup here, all right, let's go ahead and pick our dark horses for each of these teams that are going to lead them to victory, right? We already know the big 2 for each of the 2 teams, or the big 3 with Indiana, right? TMP. But let's talk about who do you think is the X factor for Boston? If he plays well, Boston wins. Who's that one player you think is the X factor?
Well, I think I think a wild card, not an X factor, is Porzingis.
Okay. For sure.
If and when he comes back. But to me, I'm going to stick with White. I think he's an X, because he's someone that has shown that can be a leading scorer for a series. He plays very good defense. He's the guy that kind of goes unaccounted for, right? They got to worry about Tatum, they got to worry about Brown, they got to worry about all those guys. And so to me, he's the X factor for Boston.
Okay. Okay. So for me, my X factor, of course, Porzingis, we all know he hasn't played yet,
He's more
and
of a wild card, not necessarily.
he's a wild card, and if he shows up and he plays well, I mean, that's the reason why Boston, is picked to win it, is because they're loaded, right? Especially with that guy.
The reason I say wild card, Eddie, is because I can envision him coming back and messing up the mojo. And
potentially, you have to reintegrate, right? Yeah, you have to reintegrate, right?
Yeah. He's an unknown at this point.
Okay, so my X factor for the Boston Celtics is the guy who had a really good game last game, and that's Drew Holiday. Yeah. Drew Holiday is my X factor for the Boston Celtics. If that guy plays like he did last game, and everybody else shows up like they should, it's not going to be close, right? But he had to carry some load because they were struggling. And in my opinion, man, what I've seen with the Boston Celtics, and it's been talked about in the media by various outlets, they tend to play iso ball. They know they have skilled players in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. They can pretty much, play one-on-one ball, but it just seems like they don't have the same motion offense like Indiana. Indiana has the motion offense, very much like what the Warriors do, right? That's what kind of took the league by storm. This whole, a read and adjust, right? And that's what a lot of these teams are doing. And the Pacers do it very, very well. They have the personnel to be able to do it very, very well. But Boston has the personnel to do it, but they just don't do it. They do the iso ball, right? They break defenses down with Jason Tatum going, you can either shoot outside or you can take it or drive to the hoop. And they have the same thing with Jaylen Brown, although Jaylen Brown isn't as good of a shooter as Jason Tatum, but they have that kind of way of playing it. And I think that, teams like, the Pacers can scheme and take that away, they need to get other people involved rather than just those two be dominant. And Drew Holiday figured that out last game, which is why I think he's going to be the X factor for the series.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. I mean, definitely Holiday is savvy enough. He's a champion. He knows, that the load can't be on just one or two guys. That load has to be distributed, a la what Denver was trying to do, or was forced to do. Maybe I should say. Good call. Yep.
Okay, so let's go to the Pacers. Who do you think has to be the X factor for the Pacers to win this thing? Who would you say? We know TMP; those guys are big, right?
Man, what's the little white guy? Sorry,
TJ McConnell.
That's it, McConnell.
TJ McConnell.
Yes, that's my wild card there. I think that he is a tough-minded player. I think that he can wreak havoc with some of the backcourt of Boston. He's a nuisance. He can score when needed. So I'm gonna lean on him. He's gonna be my wild card.
Okay. So my wild card is actually Aaron Nesmith. I think if Aaron Nesmith, and he's got an edge to him because actually the Boston Celtics is the team that actually drafted him. So he's got more to prove, to show that he belongs, right? And I'm sure he's pissed off that he didn't get a real fighting chance to be in that rotation, got traded away. And now he's actually a starter for Indiana, a team that's trying to take out the team that drafted him. I think he is going to be the X factor because he's motivated to be the X factor. So, as long as he doesn't get into foul trouble, because he's a good defender and he's going to be guarding, some of the other team's good players like a Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum at times. If he doesn't get into foul trouble and is able to, do all other things that he's being asked to do fairly decently and efficiently, I think he's going to be the X factor for the Pacers to win it. Yeah. So that's my call. Okay. All right, so let's go on to the West, man. So, we saw that the Mavs beat the Thunder again. Because of that, you called it the exact game that this would happen. That essentially sealed my fate with, our bracket pool between us. The Mavs took out the Thunder 4 games to 2 in 6 games. The Thunder, you called it a few weeks ago in the previous podcast that the Thunder are probably like 1 or 2 years away. They were the number 1 seed this year and are really deep. I mean, deep and young, and just how poised they are at this young age is incredible, man. And they have an emerging budding superstar in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That guy is just smooth as can be, man. I mean, he's just got an all around game to him. And, they're just, I think they need it. Maybe another one veteran, Gordon Hayward isn't going to cut it as the veteran to kind of, show these guys the ropes to what it takes to win in the playoffs. I think they need somebody who's got experience, just like what Kyrie Irving is doing right now for the Mavs. And the Mavs, their experience showed. Kyrie Irving's been there, right? Luka Doncic has been there with the Western Conference Finals. PJ Washington hasn't, and all the other players there, they're all relatively new to the team, and they haven't been in the playoff run as well. But the Mavs experience, I think, overcame the Thunder. And they just have two matchup nightmares in Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. That's the bottom line. That's why they beat the Thunder, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the Thunder are learning a lesson, or maybe not. They're experiencing how much different the playoffs can be than the regular season. The regular season, they're a very talented squad.
Absolutely.
They've got a lot of length. They've got a lot of offensive prowess. But when everything starts slowing down, and in the thing last episode we were talking about Luka's hurt, and I'm like, man, I don't know. I think it's one of those soccer injuries. That guy keeps saying he's hurt.
I think you're right.
He's not really hurt, and I think that some of that gamesmanship may have impacted the Thunder, thinking, oh, he's down, we don't got to worry about him, or leave him alone, and then papa, he pops out of the Jack in a Box, like here I am, screw you, and so yeah, I think they're. But it's going to be really interesting with Oklahoma, because they're, as the next couple of years, they're going to have to start paying some players. They have a lot of draft picks, a ton of draft picks. It's going to be interesting at what they do. To me, if I'm owner, I'm playing Magic owner, and money's not I'm leveraging some of those draft picks for the key players that I need to win.
For sure, and they should. They can afford to. I mean, they have a core group of young players that are all in their early 20s, man, and they should. If they have all this draft capital, they don't have many picks this upcoming season, but NBA draft that's happening in June. But we're, for subsequent years, they're going to have more draft picks. I think they should. They should go ahead and make some of these moves to bolster their roster with some veterans who can help them out. The guys who've been there.
But the track record shows that they may use that draft to let players they don't want to pay go.
It's possible. I mean, we'll see. I mean,
and if that's the path they choose, then they're going to be perpetually stuck in this, first round, second round elimination process, because the people that they're giving away are, that's experience, that's know-how.
Yeah, but Sam Presti is a pretty shrewd GM, so I think
got a good eye for talent. He's got a real good eye for talent.
Definitely. So I think he's going to do something in the offseason to bolster this Thunder team. They're going to be dangerous for the next 4 to 5 years, man. They're what the Warriors were in 2015. Well, with just a different game, not all outside shooting, right? Yeah. So anyway, let's go to the next.
By the way, I wouldn't hate that. I'd like to see Oklahoma.
Yeah. I like them too.
I like those guys. Yeah.
Yep. Me too. All right, let's go to the Wolves versus Nuggets. So that was another one that sealed my fate with you, man. You called that one 7 games that the Wolves would take it, and sure enough, they did. And one thing that I've already kind of been sounding off in some of my commentary in this episode is that depth is the main thing that I've seen that are separating some of these teams that are advancing. The Wolves. Let's face it, they were a deeper team than the Nuggets. Once the Nuggets starting 5 had to do some rest, from there, who was it? Christian Brown, Reggie Jackson.
Yep.
After that, nobody else really played.
They had to let go some of their depth last year from their championship run.
Right. Well, yeah, that was Bruce Brown and Jeff Green. I mean, those two guys, were instrumental for their
which may be a topic for another day, but the NBA is structuring the collective bargaining agreement so that we minimize dynasties.
Yeah.
That's basically what they're doing. And I, for one, as much as I hated those Laker teams, Boston teams when San Antonio was winning, to me, I enjoy rooting against teams, and the one thing that I find in this playoffs is I'm not really.
You're not hating anybody.
I'm not hating anybody. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I haven't made up my mind yet, but, I'm just kind of Denver was the one I'm like, maybe I don't want Denver winning again. But, even if they did, I kind of would have been okay with it. but we'll see. I mean, it's really coming into play because that's where Denver lost some of their bench.
Yeah, but that became very evident, man. I mean, if you looked at the last game, man, all their starters played over 40 minutes. I mean,
Well,
Mike
Jokic
Malone had to do it.
Jokic sat that
I
last game.
mean, I don't even know. I haven't looked at all the stats, but you look at the Wolves. The Wolves have Nikhil Alexander, Nikhil Alexander Walker, right? He's by the way, Shai Gilgeous' Alexander's cousin, right?
Okay.
So you have Kyle Anderson, and then you have Naz Reid.
Yep.
Right? Naz Reid. Those three guys make up their bench. 6 man of the year. Yep. So right there, they have an advantage, and against Boston, assuming Boston beats the Pacers, because both of those teams are very deep. So, if the Wolves advance, which is possible, but the Mavs are a tough matchup. And as of right now, the Timberwolves are leading by 5 points. It's 89-84, just so you know. All right, audience, you know what time we're doing this podcast. But anyway, depth is key, and that's what I've seen. And I think that the Wolves, I think their depth is going to be a big difference. And I'm calling right now that I think this is going to go 7. You already called the Wolves. I'm going to have to agree with you on that too. I think they're just a deeper squad, man. And they are tough, and they're playing for something because they want their coach who was sustained, leg injury, but it was the patella tendon.
Oh, the
patella tendon is what he tore when Mike Conley ran into him in the last series. So they're playing hard, man, and they're a good team, man. I'm impressed by them. So what do you see as far as the Wolves and Mavs, as far as the game's playing right now? But I think the Wolves, their depth is going to be the difference.
Yeah, I think so too. And I will tell you something that impressed me was Anthony Edwards impressed me on that game 7. He didn't have a very good game. He never kind of lost his composure. He continued to stay within the flow of the offense.
Right.
He wasn't forcing it. It was funny because at the end of the game, I caught myself. At the end of the game, he was waving bye-bye to the crowd, and I'm watching this and I'm going, dude, like in my head, I'm saying, don't do that.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
But hold on. And then I'm thinking, well, I've been watching Steph do his night.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's the same thing.
It is the same thing. But Steph Curry started doing it after his 4th championship, though. He didn't do it in his first playoff series run, right?
That is true, but I'm like, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. Do your thing. The one thing I didn't like was the bounce and the try to dunk at the end, where he's trying to did you see that? Where he's trying to dribble? Yeah, he's trying to throw himself an alley-oop off the ground. And shoot! Don't do that. That part I didn't like, but
he's got swag. He's got swag to him, man. I mean, you can tell just the way he carries himself, the way he talks. He's got swag, and I like it. I don't mind it, because it's not. To me, it's not arrogance. To me, it doesn't come across arrogance. It comes across as playful kind of cockiness to me. It's the way he carries himself, right? Yeah, and then the thing is, he starts calling out he wants to guard Kyrie Irving.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh man, that's a big task. I mean, he's definitely, he definitely has confidence in himself, right? But I think probably why he's doing this is he knows he's highly regarded as an offensive player, and he also doesn't want to be disregarded as a defensive player. But the other reason why is I think he's, when players do this, it tends, they're calling themselves out because it tends to make them more focused, right? So I think that's probably why he did what he did, and he's trying to get his troops rallied around him. That, hey, look, I'm going to take down, I'm going to take on one of their best players, one of their guys who can break down defenses, and I'm going to go ahead and try and stop him as much as I can. I got to give it to him. I'm interested.
I do too.
That's great.
Which is kind of crazy because one of the knocks on him, coming into the draft was that his focus,
lack of effort.
Focused. He's not. His effort is questionable, and I'm like, dude, kudos to you, bro, because you're uber focused. You're taking charge of that team. I'm like, dude, if they win the whole thing, I don't want to say it'll be because of his skill, but it'll be because of his demeanor and his approach to the way they're taking this on.
No, I agree. And and we all, we all have to thank for kind of unleashing this beast is because Steve Kerr and the Warriors were looking at drafting him. Of course, he wasn't going to fall to the number 2 pick. We got Wiseman. The Timberwolves took on Anthony Edwards, but in their workout, Anthony Edwards' workout, they pretty much said, "Hey, man, we're a good player, but we don't know if you have the tenacity, the drive. You just kind of like go through the motions," and that kind of woke him up a little bit. It was like, "Oh, this is like a championship caliber team telling me this, so I got to wake up and do something about it." So this is why you're seeing what you're seeing.
Well, we've had conversations like this before, but I tell you, I question that even if the Warriors drafted Anthony Edwards, I question whether he'd be the same guy he is today.
It's possible, yeah, because he'd be in a different offense, right? It's
not only in a different offense, he wouldn't be given the leadership role.
Yeah,
he'd be expected.
Right.
He'd be expected to fill in the gaps that the other players can't. It's
right.
just It's a different feel. I think that he went where he needed to go, and that team, Minnesota, was starving and has been starving since Kevin Garnett left for a verbal and aggressive leader. And he is filling that role.
I agree.
Wiggins is not that guy.
Nope.
Towns is not that guy.
Nope.
And he came in.
Gobert's not that guy.
Gobert is definitely not that guy. And and so he slid right in there and took charge, and no one fought him for it. Here you go, bro. It's all yours.
Right. Yeah. All right, man. So So let's go on to, before we get to the next segment. Yeah. Like we did in the last the conference. Let's pick our X factors. So for the Mavs to go on and beat the Wolves, who's the X factor that needs to step up besides Kyrie and besides Doncic?
Well, the guy that you're going to name, I already know, PJ Washington. That guy's he's going to be the one that will, if he plays like he played last series, he's going to give them everything they want and more.
Yeah.
The one guy that I would put as sort of that I'm impressed with is Lively. I really like Lively.
He has been playing very well. I agree with you, man. I mean, and they're just a long team. I mean, you just said the Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington trade definitely has made them formidable. Correct. They're a long team, right?
Correct.
So, and then you have a Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington. They're all athletic, long bigs.
That Gabbard-Lively combo can help with the Towns Gobert.
Yep, and Naz Reid. And Naz
Reid, yeah. But typically they don't – the good – I guess – I don't know if they would, but I have not seen – maybe you have. I have not seen where they play those three together. I have not seen where they play.
No, sometimes they do it in very small spurts, but no, it's too much of a matchup problem, from the defensive end to do that for Chris Finch to do that. So, but okay, I picked the same X factor for the Mavs. It's PJ Washington. How about for the Wolves? Who's the X factor that you would call out?
Well, for them
to win,
it's my guy, Mike Conley. I think that
Mike Conley.
I think he has a calming presence on that team. I think he is their understated leader. You know, if I obviously we're big Warriors fans. He's kind of the Andre Iguodala, if you will, of that squad. You know, kind of not the guy that's going to get you the most numbers, not the guy that's going to, but he's the guy that just kind of, you saw how poorly they played when he was out and how much better they played when he came back. So to me, I think a calming presence, not so much a stats machine, but just as an overall point guard and leader of the offense. I think Mike Conley is an X factor there.
So my X factor, I was not going to say Mike Conley because I wanted to save that for you because I knew you were going to call him out, right? So my guy actually is a guy who was playing very well tonight. I was watching the game prior to being on this podcast with you. Is Jalen McDaniels. Jalen McDaniels, I think, is an X factor for them just because of his tenacious defense. That he's a long, athletic, kind of tenacious defender. He's a very similar in the archetype as Herbert Jones of the New Orleans Pelicans, and he's a first team All NBA defensive team. So Jalen McDaniels is in that same mold. So and if he can shoot like he was shooting tonight, then he becomes an X factor. So my call is Jalen McDaniels. So
good call. Minnesota's they are deep, man.
They're a deep team, man. That's the problem. I think that's the reason why they're going to win. The deeper teams are the ones who are going to get to the finals.
Well, the thing is, Boston's deep, but Horford's old. They got a couple of old pieces in there.
Yep, and you can see that the Pacers are taking advantage of Horford's defensive play, even though
Minnesota's deep, but they're younger.
Yes.
And that may play a factor. I mean, obviously we both picked Boston to win the whole thing.
But
But
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know, man. We'll see. If they
All
get
right,
past
man.
Dallas,
Well,
I don't want to assume. I'm not even assuming they're going to get past Dallas. That's going to be competitive.
yeah. I mean, we're in treat for two good series here, man. And then I can't wait to see what happens as we go on. So, all right, man. So that wraps it up for segment one. We definitely spent definitely a lot more time than we
That
intended.
was
But hey,
50.
it's good talk, man. I mean, we spent a good 40 minutes on this topic, man. I mean, so we're bringing good content to you guys out there.
All
All
right,
right, so let's go to the second topic that you wanted to talk about, man. So
yes.
go ahead.
So, yeah, I wanted to talk about, what spurred this on and why this was on a couple of weeks ago. I'd already brought it up before. I don't want to belabor the point, but there was that foul on that they called on the moving screen on DiVincenzo
Oh,
for New York. And,
yes.
it didn't sit
It's
well.
Miles Turner. Miles
Yes,
Turner.
Miles Turner. And that particular play didn't sit well with me. And, and I started thinking, does the NBA want the Knicks to move forward?
Mm,
Now, clearly,
mm.
clearly that didn't play out, and that's kind of a conspiracy theory, but that kind of got my mind rolling. And the thing that is interesting about New York is a large market. They've always
Yes.
been known as a large market. They're the media center, right? But they're the only kind of large market that doesn't matter how poor they play.
Interesting.
It doesn't, whether they're
You
good
mean?
or they're bad, they're considered a large market. If you look at what I
Oh, I
consider,
know what you're saying. I know what you're saying now.
yeah, if you consider what most people would say are the other two large markets are Boston and the Lakers, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
I think they're large markets because of the amount of championships that they've won, right? They
Correct.
have the history. Because you look at the Clippers, they play in the same building, and no one would say they're a particularly large market.
You're right. That's
You know,
interesting. That's a good analogy because the Clippers are considered kind of a smaller market team,
yeah,
mainly because of their history. They haven't necessarily been a good franchise. That's
exactly.
part of the reason, right?
Exactly.
So,
So New
right.
York is very unique in the large market kind of conversation. You look at like the Bulls, right? For example,
Yeah.
where I
Yeah.
don't know how I would judge them today, but I will tell you this. Before Jordan got there, they
They
were
were a small market.
they were invisible, dude. No one talked about the Chicago Bulls.
No, I agree. I agree. They didn't. I think their biggest star for a while was Artist Gilmore. I don't even know, man. Back in the day, I'm just thinking back, like, man, who did they really have that was good? And before Jordan, you're right, they weren't really anybody.
Correct.
Uh,
And that
yeah,
same trend happened with the Warriors and Steph, right? People didn't even know where Golden State was. Where the hell is Golden State? Where do they even play? Are they an NBA team? Like no one knew about
what city's Golden State, right?
exactly. No one knew about Run TMC. I mean, we started to get on the map more for our fandom, which was the We Believe years with Baron Davis and all that, and everything kind of got relevant. But we weren't even a large market. We were like the plucky underdog that everyone wants to love type of
Yeah,
situation.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, yep.
I look at San Antonio, right? San Antonio was never a large market, but then Duncan was there, and they became what you would call a large market. So these large markets, they come and go, in my opinion, all except for New York. New York is the one, and of course because of
Boston and LA.
Boston and
They're
LA.
they're they're they're
That's
they're
it.
they're, they're the big three, really, right? And then I think they've been traditionally the big three just because they've had the most championships. As far as LA and Boston, New York is just because it's New York. The media just hypes up all the teams in New York, man. You see it. There's East Coast bias big time,
But
no
even
matter
then,
what outlet you look
even
at.
then, I would argue the Brooklyn Nets get no pub.
Yeah, just because they're a relatively new team, right? I mean, the New
New to
Jersey
the
Nets.
immediate area, yeah.
Yeah, they were the New Jersey Nets, and historically, the Nets didn't really win anything until Jason Kidd came around. In Jefferson, but you know, once they turned to Brooklyn Nets, once Jay-Z, bought ownership in that franchise, then they became the Brooklyn Nets, and so they had to kind of rebrand themselves a little bit, right? So that's part
Correct.
of the reason why you're seeing that with the Brooklyn Nets. But
Yeah, and then
it's an
they
interesting,
were on
yeah,
they were on the way up with Durant and Harden and Kyrie, and then that all fell to shreds. You
yep,
know,
yep,
and so they're back down. So anyway, my thing is, I think that Boston, LA, and New York,
yes,
and when I say LA, I mean the Lakers.
yes,
They have an inherent advantage to attract players. Um,
correct,
I think
absolutely,
I think that Boston and the Lakers have the advantage because people want to continue that tradition. They're a championship
yep,
squad. They've
Yep.
forever been. They know how to run an organization. New York, on the other hand, I think is unique where they're attractive to players that either are native to New York or understand the legacy they would create if they can win a championship with the Knicks in New York.
Yep. Yep.
There would be nothing like that.
Yeah, and then the allure of playing in Madison Square Garden, right? I
Exactly.
mean, it's an antiquated freaking stadium, man. I mean, it still has this allure just because it's so historical, man. But you know, the parquet floor was remade. You know, the Boston Garden was remade because that parquet floor was falling apart. You know, they got to do something with Madison Square Garden, man. It's freaking old and decrepit. They got to just revitalize that place. But it's got all this allure because it's New York, right? It's Madison Square Garden, the legendary Madison Square Garden, right? So that's part of the marketing of how they attract, you know, players that go there, right? It's the media, it's New York. You know, living in New York is cool, right? I mean, it's the biggest city, you know, in our nation, and you know, great food, you know, a great scene, you know, a nightlife, right? So all these young bucks get attracted to that. So yeah, in my opinion, the big market teams that you've already mentioned, they have that gravitas to me because of the legacy of that franchise, because of the viewership. You know, they're typically are able to pay more money to their star players. You know, you're not going to see, you know, like, you know, maybe Oklahoma City Thunder maybe now because of their emergence, but you're not going to see some of these small market teams just pay like their players exorbitant amount of money like you would see in LA or New York, you know, or Boston, just because they have the viewership, the TV contracts that they can get around, you know. And that's the thing. And this maybe as you research this, I don't know this, but I know that TV contracts come into play big time in football as well as baseball. I don't know if they come into play for NBA and be able to have a franchise pay their players more like they do in baseball
Well,
and football.
interestingly enough, that's all up for renewal right now. I don't know if you know this, but TNT is on the
Yeah.
precipice or may have already announced that they're losing the rights to the NBA after the end of next season. So
Yeah.
this is basically the eve of the final of Inside the NBA, which, you know, kudo, you know, it took me a while to learn what Chuck and Shaq and Kenny and Ernie were doing, you know, especially
Yep.
Chuck. Chuck's there for entertainment, and I
Yep.
love him. He's a
Yep.
goofball. You know, he made fun of the Warriors for years.
It's a Warrior hater, man.
He is a Warrior hater, but I think he hates them because they win in a way that he didn't play. Right?
Maybe. But yeah, he started hating them when he got dunked on by freaking Chris Webber in that commercial. And they made a commercial out of it, and he admitted that, man.
Yes.
He admitted that. So that's the reason. But anyway,
but he got his revenge the very next game, Eddie. He destroyed us. So I don't know why he's still pissed about that.
I know.
But anyway, so my thing is, you know, you look at like, you know, Oklahoma City right now.
Yeah.
I think that you make a small market a large market when you have an excellent player that wins several championships.
Yes, and that's definitely helps.
Because I think of players like Dominique Wilkins, right? Excellent player, good player.
Yep.
It never raised Atlanta to anything. I don't think Atlanta was ever considered. You know, Clyde Drexler over in Portland. Yep. He never elevated. You know, right now Luka Doncic. I mean, I don't know what we consider the Mavs. I wouldn't consider them small, and I wouldn't.
They're not small. They're emerging. They're not. Yeah, they're not small. They're medium. I would say medium.
Yeah, and even Denver right now, I still wouldn't consider them large.
They're probably medium
championships. You know,
medium.
Yeah, so to me, large markets are, like we said, those three teams, and I think they do have an inherent advantage of getting talent. If they're able to get talent, they will. The question that I have to you is, how much do you think, if at all, the league weighs those kind of large market teams, whoever it happens to be at the time, to try to get them into the games, into the, you know, Western Conference Finals, into the Eastern Conference Finals?
So you're saying like it.
I don't think it's a
I know what you're saying.
topic.
I know what you're saying.
Clearly, the league is going to make a lot more money if Boston gets to the finals than if Indiana does. That can't not be somehow mentioned somewhere. That has to be.
Yeah, you know, it's an unspoken truth, if you will, man. We know that the refs have a big big influence on how a game is called, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, we've always kind of believed, many of us, and the league will deny this big time, but we've always believed that there is, you know, an inherent reason for certain teams to advance farther because of ratings, right?
Yes.
We know that, right? And the league has a vested interest in certain teams to get there. So do they play a part in being able to influence how a game is called? Hey man, I say I've been seeing it for quite some time, man.
Well, I mean, I think back
Right?
to when Sacramento and the Lakers.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Sacramento had them, man. They
they
had the
had 'em. And
Lakers.
then
They
all of a
had them.
sudden, in comes the ref squad. Let's
Yep.
straighten this out, boys. Let's straighten this out.
Exactly.
You know?
The commissioner calls and says, "Come on, man,
That's
you
it.
guys got to get you better get these calls right, or play, call it a little closer so that they're shooting more free throws, man, because we need that team to get to the finals because
Exactly.
we had advertising dollars to sell, right?"
Exactly.
I hear you. I hear you. And the big market teams, man, they have that advantage, right? So it's potentially something that has been going on for quite some time that it's just unspoken. But I think a lot of us are pretty shrewd and understand that we're seeing this in front of us, and it's been happening for quite some time. So yeah, I think that there is some truth to what you're saying.
And when you pair this up with the new second apron rule, first apron, second apron rule on the CBA,
Yep.
it almost feels to me like you're inherently stopping markets from growing at this point.
Yeah.
Because if Denver never wins another championship, they'll just be, hey, Jokic was a real good player, maybe a top 10 player when it's all said and done.
Probably.
But the market, he never impacted it. Not the way Jordan impacted Chicago. I mean, think about it. If Jordan only won one championship, would he beat Jordan?
No.
Yeah.
No, he wouldn't.
So that plays a big role. This whole thing
absolutely. But the thing is that okay, what also matters is not where you play, but the player who's actually carrying that franchise. Yes. That player has to be marketable, man. And Jordan was uber marketable. Yep. I mean, because he had that same swag as Anthony Edwards has right now. More, I would say, right? Yep. And good-looking kid, good-looking guy. And won. And
that deadly smile. He's smiling at you. His
tongue coming out, right? And he's like doing the like, right? Exactly. So I mean, but it matters. Like the player, that's carrying that franchise, it matters. So he carried, the Bulls, and now they're a bigger market than they were before. Magic Johnson prior to Jordan,
Magic and Larry, they saved the league.
Right, but Magic, Bird is kind of, I would say, a little bit more of a curmudgeon kind of a personality type than Magic.
They played off each other, right?
Correct.
They played off of kind of the blue collar versus the kind of the showboat, and that was kind of the balance. I agree. If Magic never existed, Bird wouldn't be who he was.
Correct. It's the yin and the yang. But Magic just, he broke you down with this smile. I mean, you saw that Rise of the Lakers Dynasty show on HBO. I mean, they depicted him to a T perfectly, man. Yep. So it matters. So then you
look, guy, small
Steph is a lovable, but he's very marketable.
He is.
He's a very marketable guy. Whereas you look at there's a certain formula. Then you look at like the San Antonio Spurs. They have 5 championships. They have Tim Duncan, who has 5 of them, right? And David Robinson has 2, but they're not as marketable. David Robinson was marketable, but not as marketable as the guys that we just mentioned, right? Yeah. So there's something to be said that it's not only the market that you're playing for or the city, but the player. That it has to be the right marriage, man, for that to happen.
But right? let's for a minute, okay? Let's fast forward. Let's say Ant-Man is every bit the ascending player that Jordan was at the same stage.
Right.
Okay. At the end of this year, hey, we can't afford to keep Gobert. Hey, we got to trade Karl Anthony Towns. Hey, what happens to his legacy when you take all that away? Jordan never had to deal with that.
Yeah.
This isn't me going Jordan had it easier. Just the league didn't conceptualize that. The league was like, hey, if you have a good team, and this is all, to me, all of these rules exist because they don't want to happen what happened with the Warriors.
Right.
When you draft 3 studs, they don't want you to keep the 3 studs. And if you do, they don't want you to, in any way, shape, or form, be able to get someone like Kevin Durant or get someone like Andre Iguodala. They don't want you to grow that. And to me, I'm like, dude, if you draft well, you shouldn't be punished.
And that was a point that you brought up in the Big Questions interview with Big John. You brought it. He asked the question about what would you change as far as a rule in the NBA, and this is something you had talked about before. Is like, if you draft a good player and you want him to keep him, on that team, then you have the right to be able to pay him no matter what and not have it counted against the salary cap.
Or something.
They're very sneaky, man. I mean, they the team that drafts you, if they want you to keep you, they have the ability to pay you the most, more than anybody else, right?
I think that's be able. Now, I'm not trying to take away players' rights. If the player hates it, he's mistreated, whatever, then get up and go. But the team that drafted you should have the ability to keep you without being punched.
Right. So
yeah.
So, dude, bro, you know what? We are like at an hour, man. So I think what we should do is hold off for just this topic for the next week. As far as the all-time overrated players, man. Because I got to tell you, man, we'll give you a sneak peek on this. But man, there was a list of like 20 to 25 players that I had to choose from that were like, oh my God, I gotta taper this down. I gotta tell you, because what makes this one inherently hard is that you are bringing somebody down, right? And there are fans out there that love these players, and they're gonna just hate the fact that you're pointing out one of their favorite players, right?
I agree. And there's several reasons that someone might be overrated. It might be because of injury. It might be because of lack of skill. It might
whatever.
There are several reasons. It might be because they were hyped up out of college and then they never amounted to anything. There's a lot of reasons.
There's a lot of reasons. Yeah. But as I was looking through this list, man, some of the players that we had in episode 7, where we talked about the most underrated players, some of those players were showing up as the most overrated players. Yeah. So, like John Stockton, who I thought was one of the most underrated players, he's showing up as one of the most overrated players. I'm like, what? No freaking way, man.
I think some of the calculations that went into that is the amount of championships that player may have won.
Correct. I mean, that comes into play, right? So you have to pick your criteria. So that's what I'm saying. My criteria is going to be different. I'm just giving the audience a sneak peek of what we're going to talk about for the next episode, because we had intended to talk about it this episode, but we definitely ran way over time on these segments because we definitely wanted to, we have some good content lined up for you for next week. But the John Stockton was one of them that was mentioned. David Robinson was another one that was mentioned up, and those are two guys that I put on my top underrated players. So I was like, and then I got to tell you one that just really, like I said, we're bringing people down here, and we're gonna start kind of pissing off some of the people that are listening to our show because some of these guys might be their favorite players of all time. Klay Thompson was one of them, and that's yours and I's
my favorite
one of our top favorite players on the Warriors, and he was considered as one of the most overrated players of all time. He's not on my list.
Someone I came across and refused to put on my list was Allen Iverson.
Yeah, I know. I heard that one. I saw that one too, man. But we're telling you players that we have not put on the list. So just stay tuned for next time. We're going to talk about the most overrated players for the next episode. So let's just go ahead and end this one, man, Twan. This is Buzzer Beaters episode 8. This is Eddie Aparicio and Anthony Twan Corral signing off for Buzzer Beaters. You can find Buzzer Beaters at grumblingsmedia.com, Rumble, YouTube under their profile Grumblings Media, as well as your traditional podcast outlets such as Spotify, Google, Apple, and Pandora. And you can also find us on Facebook and X, formerly known as Twitter. Twan, man, we got a lot of good content, man, and we definitely we get a little long-winded, but hey, man, we're good, man. We got it within an hour this time. That was our intent, but we didn't cover the third topic. So next week we'll definitely cover it. Again, signing off. This is Buzzer Beaters episode 8. Good night, everyone.
All right, good night, everyone.
Hey everybody, this is Big John from Grumblings Media, and I just want to say thank you for watching our content. If you want to support our efforts here at Grumblings Media, just smash the subscribe button right here, totally free, or just go ahead and consume more of our great content. Click either one of these 2 boxes.